Welcome to the deep dive. If you are that listener we like to call, the learner, someone who is just incredibly hungry for knowledge, loves those sudden aha moments, but maybe is a little short on time today, you are in the exact right place.
Yeah, we are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us.
Today, our mission is a big one. We are looking at a stack of incredibly comprehensive notes, historical records, biographical data, basically detailing the entire life story of a man widely regarded as rock's greatest instrumentalist.
We are talking about Jimi Hendrix.
Exactly, Jimi Hendrix.
And this material covers absolutely everything. I mean,
Right.
we are talking about his deeply impoverished childhood in Seattle, all the way through to his tragic sudden death in London at just 27 years old.
Right. But we want to be very clear about our approach today. I want to promise you right up front, we aren't just going to sit here and recount a standard rock star timeline.
No typical born here, played there, died here biography today.
Right. Our goal today is to really uncover exactly how Hendrix completely re-engineered the very vocabulary of the electric guitar.
Because whether you are a professional musician, a weekend hobbyist, or, someone who has never even picked up an instrument in your life, Hendrix's approach provides an absolute masterclass.
It really does.
It's a study in obsessive experimentation, manipulating physics, and this is key, turning perceived limitations into massive innovations. It is essentially a blueprint for anyone looking to break the established rules in their own field.
So let's set the scene and figure out where that kind of obsession actually starts. We are in Seattle, Washington during the mid-1950s.
Right.
And the picture of his early life is pretty stark. I mean, his family was severely impoverished, constantly moving between cheap hotels and apartments.
Yeah, it was a really tough, unstable home environment.
And young Jimmy, who was actually going by the name Jimmy at the time, was a shy, sensitive kid navigating all of that. And there's this striking detail from his elementary school years. He developed a habit of carrying a broom around with him everywhere.
A broom. Like, he would literally cling to this broom like a security blanket, sweeping it like a guitar neck, just completely lost in his own imagination.
Wow.
And it wasn't just a fleeting childhood phase either. It was such an intense, constant attachment that a school social worker actually took notice of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. A social worker observing a kid pretending to play a broom and recognizing, hey, this isn't just a child playing make-believe. This is a profound psychological necessity.
Exactly. I mean, she spent over a year trying to secure school funding intended for underprivileged children just to buy him a real guitar.
A whole year.
Yeah, she even wrote a formal letter insisting that leaving this child without a musical instrument might result in genuine psychological damage.
That is wild.
But the funding was denied, and his father refused to buy him one.
So he is completely blocked by circumstance. But what does he do? In 1957, he is helping his dad remove garbage from an older woman's home, and he finds a ukulele in the trash.
Just tossed out.
It's throwaway. And it only has one single string left on it. But on that single string, learning entirely by ear, he figures out how to play along to Elvis Presley's Hound Dog.
It perfectly encapsulates his inherent musicality. He didn't let the massive constraint of a single string stop him. He just adapted to the tool he had.
Yeah.
Finally, in mid-1958, when he was 15 years old, he acquired his first actual acoustic guitar for $5.
$5.
Right. And from that moment on, the obsession took full hold. He played for hours every single day, practically sleeping with the instrument and obsessively absorbing the records of blues legends like Muddy Waters.
But the road to becoming a rock god wasn't exactly a straight line. By the time he was a teenager, he found himself getting into some serious trouble.
What's fascinating here is how this apparent detour actually laid the foundational groundwork for his future sound.
Right.
Before he turned 19, authorities caught him riding in stolen cars twice. And he was given a stark choice by the judge: go to prison or join the military.
Wow, okay. So he chose the Army and enlisted in the 101st Airborne Division as a paratrooper.
He did.
I have to imagine a free-spirited, guitar-obsessed teenager did not mesh well with the strict hierarchy of the 101st Airborne. How did he handle the military structure?
Terribly. Honestly, his obsession with his guitar completely overshadowed his duties. His superiors caught him napping while on watch, he missed bed checks, and he was even deemed an unqualified marksman.
Oh, man.
His peers bullied him constantly for his relentless guitar playing, too. At one point, they even hid the instrument until he begged for it back.
It was rough.
But this military stint was crucial for one very specific reason. In November 1961, a fellow serviceman was walking past an army club and heard Hendrix playing inside.
And that serviceman was a bass player named Billy Cox, right?
Exactly. Cox was blown away. He later described the playing as a bizarre combination of the bluesman John Lee Hooker and the classical composer Beethoven.
What a combination.
Right. They immediately started jamming together. And that connection is incredibly important because it laid the foundation for the power trios Hendrix would later make famous.
Okay, let's explain why a power trio is so demanding for the listener. In a standard band, you might have a rhythm guitarist, a lead guitarist, a keyboardist, a bassist, and a drummer.
Lots of layers to fill the sound.
Exactly. But in a power trio, it's just drums, bass, and one single guitar. That one guitar has to carry the melody, the rhythm, and the lead all at once so the sound doesn't feel empty.
Right.
And the rhythm section of his future power trio was literally born on a military base in Kentucky.
Precisely. So eventually the military realizes Hendrix is not soldier material, and he gets an honorable discharge.
Makes sense.
Yeah. He and Billy Cox move to Tennessee, which kicks off a grueling period of his life where he is paying his dues on the 2BA circuit, much more widely known as the Chitlin Circuit.
And for those who might not know, the Chitlin Circuit was a vital network of venues, clubs, and theaters throughout the United States that provided a safe and acceptable space for African-American entertainers to perform during the era of racial segregation.
It was essential.
It was, but the touring schedules were absolutely punishing. He's playing backup for absolute legends, Little Richard, the Isley Brothers, Ike, and Tina Turner. But it's a grind, and it's super restrictive.
Yeah, it was a highly structured, almost corporate environment in terms of rules. Band leaders, like Little Richard, ran a really tight ship.
Like, how strict are we talking?
They had strict mandates about wardrobe, stage presence, where you stood, what you played, and absolute punctuality.
And Hendrix was naturally flamboyant.
Very. He dressed loudly, he wanted to push boundaries and experiment with solos, and so he constantly clashed with these band leaders. He was frequently fined or even fired for upstaging the star.
And to survive in that environment and still get noticed, he had to find ways to stand out, which led to some wild stage gimmicks.
There's this incredible story about him learning how to play the guitar with his teeth from a bandmate in Tennessee.
Yes.
Hendrix later talked about it, basically saying, down there you have to play with your teeth or else you get shot. There's a trail of broken teeth all over the stage.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, those difficult years on the Chitlin Circuit were Hendrix's incubator. He was mastering the deep grooves of rhythm and blues, learning impeccable stagecraft, and building undeniable technical chops.
But the frustration of being artistically stifled by strict band leaders eventually boiled over, right?
Exactly. He felt he had to break free, so he makes a massive leap and moves to New York City to venture out on his own.
And that move to New York triggers the massive turning point. He's playing a gig in a club, and he catches the eye of Linda Keith, who was Keith Richards' girlfriend at the time.
She was completely mesmerized, utterly mesmerized by what he's doing. She tries to get him signed, and when her first attempts fall through, she connects him with Chas Chandler. Now, Chas Chandler was a bass player just leaving the successful British band The Animals, and he was looking to move into management.
Right, and Chandler watches Hendrix play his arrangement of the song Hey Joe, and he immediately sees the vision. He essentially says, I am taking you to London.
Wow.
So in late 1966, Hendrix arrives in the UK. And you have to understand the London music scene at this time, it is totally dominated by blues purists.
Right. The reigning king is Eric Clapton, who was playing in the band Cream. The graffiti on the walls in London literally says Clapton is God.
Which sets up one of the most legendary encounters in rock history. It's October 1966. Cream is playing a show at the London Polytechnic.
Okay.
Chandler brings this completely unknown American guitarist backstage, and Hendrix politely asks if he can sit in for a song.
That takes some nerve.
Oh, absolutely. He gets up on stage with Cream, plugs in, and launches into a frantic, blistering version of the Howlin' Wolf song Killing Floor.
Which is a notoriously difficult, fast-paced song to play.
And Clapton's reaction is very telling. He later said that Hendrix played just about every style you could think of, not in a flashy, show-off way, but effortlessly.
Effortlessly.
Clapton recalled walking off the stage, his hands literally dropping to his sides, thinking, my life is never going to be the same again.
That is amazing.
This unknown American had just blown the reigning guitar god off his own stage.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because to understand why he blew Clapton's mind, we have to look past the showmanship and look at the actual gear. Hendrix wasn't just playing the guitar better than anyone else, he was fundamentally hacking the instrument.
Yeah, he really was.
And if you've never thought about the physical engineering of an electric guitar, what he did next is fascinating. Hendrix was left-handed, but instead of buying a left-handed guitar, he took a standard right-handed Fender Stratocaster, flipped the entire body completely upside down, and restrung it so he could play it left-handed.
And that might sound like a simple cosmetic quirk, just a guy making do with what he has. But the physics of that choice physically altered the instrument's tone.
How so?
Well, a Fender Stratocaster has a slanted bridge pickup. The pickup is the magnetic device that captures the vibration of the strings. By flipping the guitar upside down, the geometry of that slanted pickup is completely reversed in relation to the strings.
Right, because normally the pickup is closer to the bridge for the high strings, making them bright, and further away for the low strings, making them warm. But Hendrix reversed it.
Exactly. This meant that his lowest string now had a brighter, more piercing, aggressive sound, and his highest string had a darker, warmer, more vocal quality.
Which is the exact opposite of the guitar's intended acoustic design.
Exactly. He unintentionally re-engineered the frequency balance of rock guitar.
He also threw out standard classical guitar technique. Most players use bar chords, which means laying your index finger completely flat and rigid across the entire fretboard to hold down all the strings.
Right.
Hendrix rejected that entirely. He had massive hands, so he used his thumb to reach over the top of the neck and fret the low sixth string.
Which is brilliant because it freed up his other four fingers to play intricate, dancing lead melodies at the exact same time he was playing the foundational rhythm chords.
So he wasn't playing rhythm then lead.
No, he was playing them simultaneously. It sounded like a pianist using a left hand for bass and a right hand for melody, giving the audience the illusion that two entirely different guitarists were playing at once.
And he didn't stop with the guitar itself. He pushed the boundaries of amplification technology, too. On the R&B circuit, you used whatever standard amps were at the club. But in England, Hendrix met Jim Marshall, the creator of Marshall amplifiers, and demanded unprecedented power.
He really wanted to push the volume.
He did. He started buying 100-watt Marshall amps. And he didn't just use one, he stacked 3 of them together, and he turned every single control knob, volume, bass, treble, middle, to the absolute maximum level. This literally became known in the industry as the Hendrix setting.
Stacking 3 100-watt amps cranked to the absolute maximum creates a volume that is just earth-shattering. But it was deliberate.
It wasn't just to be loud.
No. That extreme volume and gain created what every audio engineer previously considered an undesirable flaw amplifier feedback. That shrieking, uncontrollable howling sound.
But Hendrix didn't see feedback as a flaw to be avoided. He harnessed it. By moving his guitar closer or further from the speakers, he turned that screaming feedback into a controlled, fluid vocabulary.
And he brought that exact same obsessive, rule-breaking experimentation into the recording studio. The studio stories are incredible.
Oh, the studio stories.
Chandler quickly built the Jimi Hendrix experience with Noel Redding on bass and Mitch Mitchell on drums, and they had massive hits. But by their second album, Axis, Bold as Love, Hendrix is pushing the limits of the studio.
They were on a strict deadline for that one, right?
They were. And Hendrix actually lost the master tape of side 1 by leaving it in the backseat of a London taxi.
The panic must have been unimaginable.
Oh, totally. They had to remix almost the entire first side of the album in a single, frantic overnight session. But despite that chaos, the album features groundbreaking technical work. The coda of the title track contains the very first recording of stereo phasing in rock music.
We should define stereo phasing for everyone. It's an analog effect achieved by manipulating 2 tape machines playing the exact same track so they go slightly out of sync. It creates this swirling, swooshing sound that actually feels like the audio is revolving in physical circles around your head. It's incredibly disorienting and futuristic.
Yeah, and his perfectionism only grew from there. By their third album, Electric Ladyland, the tension was palpable. He moved the sessions to New York and took over the production duties himself.
He wanted full control.
He demanded endless, repeated takes of songs. He would make the band play a track 50 times to get the exact tone he heard in his head, which frustrated his manager, Chas Chandler, so much that Chandler actually quit.
He also started treating the studio like a hangout spot, filling the control room with partying friends and guests, which deeply alienated his bassist, Noel Redding.
Right.
But despite all that interpersonal chaos and the agonizing perfectionism, Electric Ladyland became an undeniable masterpiece. It was his most commercially successful release, featuring brilliant covers like Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower, and it became his one and only #1 album in the United States.
It's remarkable that out of that intense party atmosphere came such a meticulous, visionary record. And as his studio sound expanded, his stage presence reached mythical proportions.
Because he had conquered London, but he was still largely unknown in America.
That changed in 1967 when he returned to the U.S. to play the Monterey Pop Festival, and he got that gig largely because Paul McCartney insisted to the organizers that the festival would be a joke without Hendrix.
Hendrix knew he had to make an unbelievable impact. The band The Who had played earlier in the festival, and their trademark was violently destroying their instruments on stage. Hendrix realized he needed to upstage them.
He had to go bigger.
So at the climax of his set, he took theatricality to a new level. He literally sacrificed his guitar. He laid it on the stage, set it on fire with lighter fluid, summoned the flames with his fingers like a shaman, and then smashed it to pieces.
It was a shocking, visceral performance art piece. And there is a brilliant detail about how that specific moment was captured for history.
The photograph.
Yes. There was a 17-year-old freelance photographer named Ed Cariff at the festival. He had never even heard of Jimi Hendrix before that day. But he is standing on a chair right at the edge of the stage, shielding his face from the intense heat of the fire, and he realizes he only has one single frame of film left in his camera.
One frame.
With that one remaining shot, he captures Hendrix kneeling before the burning guitar. It became one of the most iconic images in the history of rock and roll.
That one performance skyrocketed him to massive fame in America, which leads us to August 1969 and Woodstock. By this point, Hendrix is the highest-paid rock musician in the world. He was scheduled to be the grand finale, closing the festival at midnight on Sunday. But because of massive rain delays and logistical nightmares, he didn't actually take the stage until 8 a.m. on Monday morning.
He had been awake for over 3 days straight. And the crowd, which had peaked at around 400,000 people over the weekend, had dwindled down to just 30,000 exhausted, mud-soaked fans.
But it was to that drastically reduced morning crowd that he delivered his defining live moment, his rendition of the U.S. national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner.
The way he played it was completely unprecedented. He used copious amounts of distortion, sustain, and aggressive feedback to sonically imitate the sounds of warfare, the shrieks of falling rockets, the wailing of sirens, and the explosions of bombs.
And looking at this objectively, just reporting on what observers noted at the time, contemporary political pundits immediately viewed this performance as a massive political protest against the Vietnam War.
Right. It was widely interpreted as a searing anti-war statement. But Hendrix himself was actually a little more elusive when he was asked directly about it.
What did he say?
A few weeks later on a talk show, he said, "We're all Americans. It was like Go America. We play it the way the air is in America today. The air is slightly static, see?"
The air is slightly static.
Yeah.
What a brilliant, ambiguous answer that refuses to be boxed in and lets the music speak for itself. He managed to capture the cultural tension and the noise of the late 1960s in a single, unaccompanied guitar solo.
He really did.
So what does this all mean? The fame, the money, the creative genius, it all came at an incredibly high and tragic price. The records are very candid about the darker realities of his life during this peak period.
Yeah.
Despite all his monumental success, he was struggling deeply with severe substance abuse.
Yes. Alcohol is a particularly dangerous trigger for him. Friends and bandmates noted that while he was generally a very sweet, soft-spoken, and quiet guy, liquor set off a deeply bottled-up anger.
Oh, wow.
When intoxicated, he would experience violent, out-of-character rages, smashing windows in hotel rooms, or getting into physical altercations. Furthermore, after 1967, his reliance on illicit drugs like LSD and amphetamines grew significantly as a way to cope with the grueling, relentless demands of global touring.
And the stress just kept compounding. In May 1969, he was passing through customs in Toronto, Canada, and authorities found a small amount of heroin and hashish in his luggage. He was formally charged with drug possession.
That had to be terrifying.
It was. Now, he was ultimately acquitted by a jury. He testified that a fan had given him a vial of what he thought was legal medication, and he just slipped it into his bag without looking. But even with the acquittal, that trial hung over his head for 7 months, weighing heavily on his mind and his creativity.
This raises an important question. How did a man so sensitive to sound and pressure cope with that kind of intense global scrutiny?
His answer was to build a sanctuary. He and his manager had initially purchased a nightclub in Greenwich Village, New York. But the bills for Hendrix's constant obsessive studio bookings at other facilities were so exorbitant, running around $300,000 a year, that they decided to scrap the nightclub idea and convert the space into his own personal recording studio.
This became the legendary Electric Lady Studios. It cost an estimated $1 million to build, which was double their original budget.
Double the budget.
But he didn't care about the cost because he had it custom designed specifically to soothe his creativity. He requested that there be no harsh right angles in the architecture.
It's a very specific request.
Yeah, the designer installed round windows, curved walls, and an ambient lighting machine to make it a deeply relaxing, womb-like environment where he could just create.
And he absolutely loved that studio. He spent weeks there.
Yeah.
But tragically, he only got to use it for a few months in the summer of 1970 before his management insisted he leave for a European tour to generate revenue.
And that tour was a disaster from the start. He was exhausted, he missed his new studio, and his bandmates were struggling with their own paranoia and drug use. In early September, he abandoned a show in Denmark after just 3 songs, stepping up to the microphone and telling the crowd, "I've been dead a long time."
That is chilly.
A few days later in Germany, he played his final concert ever amidst torrential rain and a booing crowd.
He retreated to London to rest. And on the morning of September 18, 1970, after spending the previous evening with a girlfriend, taking a large number of sleeping pills and drinking wine, he was found unresponsive in her apartment.
It's so sad.
He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead at the age of just 27. The coroner concluded he had aspirated his own vomit and died of asphyxia while heavily intoxicated with barbiturates.
It was a devastating sudden end to a mainstream career that really only lasted 4 short years.
4 years.
But the density of those 4 years fundamentally altered the trajectory of modern music. You simply cannot overstate his influence. He didn't just inspire other rock guitarists. The material highlights how his rhythmic innovations shaped the entire genre of funk, directly influencing pioneers like George Clinton and later Prince.
He inspired post-punk and grunge too, with players like Kurt Cobain citing his raw energy as a major influence. Even hip-hop artists like A Tribe Called Quest and the Beastie Boys heavily sampled and drew from his rhythmic phrasing.
Even the jazz legend Miles Davis was deeply impressed by him. Davis went so far as to compare Hendrix's improvisational genius and ability to intuitively follow a melody to the legendary jazz saxophonist John Coltrane.
That is unfathomably high praise from one of the most demanding, brilliant musicians of the 20th century.
And it underscores the truth that Hendrix wasn't just a rock star playing loud music. He was a serious, deeply intuitive musical innovator who successfully synthesized the history of blues, jazz, R&B, and rock into something entirely unprecedented.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener. Jimi Hendrix wasn't just born with a supernatural magical gift that can't be analyzed. He was a creator who looked at a standard piece of wood and wire and asked, what else can this do?
Exactly.
He took his physical constraints, like being a lefty with a right-handed guitar, and actively turned them into acoustic advantages. He took the industry's defined mistakes, like an amplifier screaming with feedback, and turn them into a completely new musical vocabulary.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on the sheer technical innovations we've discussed today. Hendrix was a true pioneer of electronic soundscapes. He took raw analog gear, like the Octavia pedal, which automatically generates a sound 1 octave higher than the note being played, and the Univibe, which creates a pulsing, rotating speaker effect, and he pushed them to their absolute physical breaking point.
Pushed them right to the edge.
He did this to create sounds that literally did not exist in the human experience before he played them.
That's incredible to think about.
Now, imagine for a second what a mind so obsessed with futuristic sci-fi soundscapes would have done if he had lived just a decade longer.
Oh, man.
What would Jimi Hendrix have created in the 1980s or 90s when digital synthesizers, drum machines, sampling, and modern digital production became widely available? What unimaginable sounds did we miss out on because he was lost at 27?
That is a wild, haunting thought. The idea of Jimi Hendrix with a digital sampler and modern synths, it completely rewrites music history in your head. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We highly encourage you to go listen to some of the isolated guitar tracks from Axis, Bold as Love, or watch the live Woodstock recording of the Star-Spangled Banner with fresh ears today. You will hear the physics, the rule breaking, and the sheer genius in a completely new way. We'll see you next time.